this year has taught me anything, every month I'm gonna switch between reading no books and then reading all of the books. Hey everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. Today we are doing a classic wrap-up. I'm gonna tell you about the books that I read in March and April. So March was a pretty rough reading month. I had a lot of health issues, so I only really got through, I think, 3 books. And then in April I was doing a lot better and I was also filming a couple vlogs, so I actually got through a lot of reading. And between the 2 months I read 15 books. A lot of you commented on my last wrap-up where I told you about the 17 books I read so far in the year, which was basically January and February. And you guys said that it was nice to get these like bi-monthly wrap-ups because it feels just more realistic to you guys. And I totally agree. As someone who is juggling a full-time job and doing YouTube and trying to read, it's really hard to find the time. And so I feel like I'm always gonna have an off month here and there, but I can always make up for it with a really great month after that, or just split the difference. So as I say in most of these wrap-up videos, it does not matter how much you are reading, it just matters that you are reading, you are still a valid reader. Alrighty, let's get into the 15 books I read over these past 2 months. I tried to split these into categories that sort of make sense. And the first category I want to talk about is new releases, and I'm gonna start with Funny Story by Emily Henry. I know this was an anticipated release for a lot of people, and me included, and this book, I'm having a hard time deciding how I feel about it. As some of you may remember from last year, I didn't actually love Happy Place all that much, which was Emily Henry's previous book, and that was partly due to the fact that it felt more like a contemporary fiction rather than a romance, and I didn't really like the romance in that book. And since then, I've grasped onto this theory that there is a difference between the Happy Place girlies and the beach read girlies. I am one of the beach read girlies who really loved beach read and book lovers. That type of Emily Henry book really worked for me, but the Happy Place type of Emily Henry book didn't really work for me. And when it comes to Funny Story, I think this one veers closer to Happy Place for me. Although I didn't dislike this as much as Happy Place, I didn't find myself super excited while reading it. I felt very meh the entire time, and that usually doesn't happen for me when I'm reading an Emily Henry book. Recently, I just feel like her books aren't hitting me in the same way, and I don't know if it's just the phase in life I'm going through or if I've been reading better romance books, but this just didn't do it for me. I did think it was cute. I did like the characters. I liked the progression of the romance, and I did like the resolution and all of the character growth that happens in the book. But overall, the book just felt really forgettable to me and not as compelling as Beach Read or Book Lovers was for me. Now, part of this I think is due to the fact that I didn't really like the love interest in this book. He was all right, but he wasn't that magnificent. Like the love interest in Happy Place, it just didn't really connect with his character. And although he was really sweet and vulnerable, I just wasn't really feeling it. So if I had to rate this one, it would probably be a 3.5 or 4 star. Nothing more than that because it just didn't hit me the same way. Another new release that I picked up was Finlay Donovan Rolls the Dice by Elle Cosimano. This is the 4th book in the Finlay Donovan series, and I binged that series last year and absolutely fell in love with it. This book did not disappoint. It was just as entertaining as the previous books. It had all of the hijinks and the fun characters and chaotic mystery bits going on, and I loved every moment of it. I did listen to the audiobook for this one because the audiobooks for this series are just fantastic. And I should mention that I did read the novella that the author wrote that follows one of the side characters, Veronica. The novella was really fun and cute, and I think it gave us more context before going into this book because we learn a lot more about Veronica. Overall, I just don't have much to say about this because it was just fun and rompy and cute, and if you've read the previous books in the series, then you're probably gonna love this as well. Alright, and then the other new release that I picked up was Never Been Better by Leanne Toshiko Simpson. This was a release that wasn't even on my radar until really close to its release date. The author actually reached out to me to invite me to her launch event for the book, and part of the reason was because she also has bipolar disorder like me, and she had written this book about a main character who has bipolar disorder and is dealing with that, but is also having a rom-com-esque experience in this book. This book follows our main character, Dee, who is hospitalized for her bipolar disorder, and she made some friends while she was in the psychiatric ward, and those 2 friends were Misa and Matt. And Dee has been always in love with Matt for many years, but after they all left the psych ward and started their own lives, Misa and Matt ended up dating and getting engaged, and now they are having a destination wedding in Turks and Caicos, and they want Dee to attend. And so Dee is a character who's still struggling with her life. She hasn't really figured everything out post the psych ward, and she finds herself looking at Misa and Matt and all of the things that they have going for them and just feeling discouraged. And not to mention the fact that, you know, she's in love love with Matt. But regardless, she decides to go to this wedding, takes her sister with her, and a lot of funny hijinks ensue. And what I loved about this book particularly was not only the bipolar disorder representation, which was just lovely, it was a representation that wasn't like sad and depressing, and it just felt closer to like my own experience with bipolar disorder as well. But another thing I really loved about this book was the complicated relationship between Dee and Misa, and I think that relationship is actually the most important one in the book rather than the romantic relationship or feelings that Dee has for Matt. And I really loved how by the end Dee really started to value herself more and understand that she doesn't need to hold herself to the same standards as other people. This was a story about mental health, about friendship, about love, and about accepting yourself and just learning to heal. So overall, it was just a lovely read, and if you're into contemporary fiction or if you're looking for more mental illness representation, this is definitely one to pick up. Alrighty, next up I want to talk about the February, March, and April book club selections that I had for my book club, the Boundless Book Club on Fable. Fable is a really awesome app where people host their book clubs, and you can also talk to other people about books. And in each book club, there are these little chat rooms for each chapter of the book that you're all reading for the month, which makes for a really easy way to talk about the book without spoiling each other. And not only that, if you do buy the book through Fable, you can use their interactive e-reader, and with the interactive e-reader you can highlight and add notes and reactions and have this sort of social experience while reading. So if any of that seems interesting, definitely go check out the link down below to join my book club, and you can read with me and thousands of other people. And our book club selection for May is The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida by Shehan Karunatakala. I started this book last year and it's definitely on my list to finish this month because I was loving it. I just had to put it down because I was starting other books and I was just having a very personal experience with it that made it a little bit hard to read. But essentially this book follows our main character, Mali, who has died. It's set in Sri Lanka in 1990, and Mali happened to be a war photographer during the Sri Lankan Civil War, and so he finds himself awakening in the afterlife, and he's been told that he needs to do these certain tasks to reach his ultimate destination and peaceful rest. But instead he finds himself getting embroiled in the mystery of how he died and what prompted his murder. It's a super interesting read that marries speculative fiction with historical fiction, and overall I am loving it. So I'm going to be finishing this with my book club this month, so definitely join down below if you want to read with me. So our February book club pick was A Woman Is No Man by Ataf Rum. You guys know that I absolutely loved this author's other book, Evil Eye, and Ataf Rum is a Palestinian American author, and this book was just so freaking stunning, and honestly it's probably one of my favorite books of this year, favorite books of all time. I want everyone to read it because it was just so beautiful but also so heartbreaking, and after finishing it I was just like left with this empty feeling in my heart because I was just so sad but also just so impressed with how Ataf Rum portrayed the story. Essentially this book follows 3 generations of Palestinian women. It follows the grandmother Farida, and then her daughter-in-law Isra, and then Isra's daughter Dea. When the book opens, we're following Isra as her parents organize a arranged marriage for her, and she's going to be marrying a Palestinian man who is now residing in America with his family. And so Isra moves to America with her new husband and is now living with her mother-in-law Farida. And Farida is someone who's gone through so much in her life, lived through the occupation and through living in refugee camps. But despite all of her struggles, she finds herself upholding all of these patriarchal norms, which end up affecting Isra's life as well. Now, another perspective that we get opening up with the book is Dea's, Isra's daughter, and from her perspective we find out that Isra and her husband have died, and Dea is under the care of her grandmother Farida, who is now planning an arranged marriage for Dea, and Dea feels sort of trapped in this situation, not knowing what to do, and she's also plagued with these memories of her mother and father and what happened in her childhood, and is starting to doubt that her parents actually died in a car crash. This book examines generational trauma in such a stunning way and portrays all of these characters and these different generations of women in such truthful and honest ways, and shows how even the more awful character like Farida is still a human and still someone who has suffered so much, and there are reasons for why she's doing what she's doing. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but it does give an explanation. Yeah, this is a book that's very hard to read, honestly, but it was just so well written, and I found myself just unable to look away. I was just so sucked into the story, and I wanted to know what was going to happen next. And this also has one of the most striking plot twists I've ever read, and it really did did take me by surprise. So yeah, cannot recommend this enough. It was a definite 5 stars, life-changing read. I just want everyone else to go pick this up because it's so amazing. Now, the Boundless Book Club's March pick was Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is my second Octavia E. Butler book. I read Kindred by the author earlier this year and absolutely loved it. This book was equally thought-provoking and interesting, and also involves a speculative element. And while I did really enjoy this, I do think it wasn't as stunning to me as Kindred was, but it was really, really interesting. The book follows our main character, Lauren, who has this condition called hyperempathy, where if she sees someone hurt or in pain, she feels the same pain and is put in the same position. And the book actually opens in the early 2020s, and this is a futuristic, dystopian-esque envisioning of our current day. This was first published in 1993, so Octavia E. Butler was envisioning the future. And in the early 2020s, the world is facing all of this social chaos. There have been economic crises and so much climate change, and everyone is attempting to survive and fend for themselves. It really felt like the vibe of The Last of Us, if you've watched the show or you know the game. Obviously, it doesn't have the zombies, but it did have the overall vibe of everyone trying to survive and all of the regular structures of humanity having fallen apart. But the way the book is told is through these diary/journal entries that Lauren writes as she's experiencing these different things, and the journal entries span over several years as well. And throughout these years, Lauren starts to develop a type of religion, you could say. It's this idea that change is inevitable and that God is change, and it's this attempt to find solace in this crazy situation. This actually has a sequel as well. It's called Parable of the Talents, which I'm definitely going to be picking up sometime soon, because this book definitely leaves the narrative and the characters at a certain point, and you know that there's more to their story. Overall, this was just really thought-provoking and interesting, and while I was very intrigued by it the entire time, I do think it was a bit long and did get a little slow in between, which is why I wouldn't give it a full 5 stars, but it was really intriguing, so I definitely want to pick up the sequel, and I feel like once I get the full picture, I might like it better. I also feel like reading this for the first time, a few things like went over my head, and maybe if I read it again, I would like it a bit more. But if you're not someone who likes survival narratives or dystopians, then you might not like this, so take it with a grain of salt. I personally don't like survival stories, even though I do like some dystopians, so this was in between that range, and so that's probably why I didn't love it. Speaking of dystopias, our book club's April pick was Severance by Ling Ma. This book essentially has like 2 timelines. One where the world has sort of collapsed under this virus. It feels very COVID, but this book was actually published in 2018, so pre-COVID. So the world has collapsed under this virus, and it's actually turning some people into zombie-like creatures. They're not zombies in the sense that they want to kill people and consume them. They just become zombies in the sense that they're not really living anymore, and they're just going through similar motions. And so there are some people who have been unaffected by the virus, and we are following our main character who has joined this group of survivors and is just trying to make it through alive. But then we also get chapters from the past where we follow our main character and all of the events that led up to this overall social demise. And those chapters go through the main character's state of mind, her experience as a millennial, her immigrant experience, and it's overall just this interestingly weird narrative that's also very anti-capitalist, but also just very hot sad girl vibe-ish. If you like hot sad girl books or unhinged woman books, it felt in that realm. I also read this in a blog where I read hot sad girl books, so if you want more thoughts on this, definitely go check out that video because I give you more of my in-depth thoughts. Overall, I think if you like hot sad girl books, then you'll probably enjoy this one, but I do think it wasn't my favorite. It did feel a little bit long and the pacing was a little bit weird at some points, so I think I would probably give this like a 4 star, but it was still really interesting. And the way that it had so many parallels to the actual pandemic, even though this was written before the pandemic, was just so insane. Alrighty, next up I have 5 books that I read for a vlog where I read booktuber's favorite spicy romances. If you haven't gone and watched that video yet, please go do that. I give you in-depth thoughts on each of these books and live reactions, but I'm just gonna quickly go through these. So I have Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. This is a romance that follows 2 Nigerian British characters who are in the same college, and it involves a fake dating situation as well. This was overall just a really well written and really entertaining and funny read. I loved the main characters and I think their chemistry was just stunning, and it also just has like a really cheesy and adorable and sweet ending to it, so I just really liked it and was definitely a fun romance. But if you're going into this expecting spice, it's not really spicy. It's got a teeny bit of spice, but not much. And then next I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This book was on the one hand very entertaining in the sense that I was laughing the entire time, and then on the other hand I was just like, why does anyone like this book? It's so cliche, it's so cheesy, it is the most basic small town romance that you will ever read, and the way that the spicy sex scenes were written was just... I have no words. Next I picked up The Right Move by Liz Tomford. This was a sports romance. It follows a basketball player and then this girl who is a flight attendant or works with this hockey team or something like that. This was actually a really fun and really touching romance. It had some really great character work. The spicy scenes were fantastic and I just really liked both of our main characters, so it made for an enjoyable read. The only negative thing I would say about this one is that it was a bit long for my taste, so towards the end I just felt it was dragging along when it could have been resolved earlier. The next book that I read was Meeting Millie by Claire Ashton. I've been talking about this all over TikTok because I just loved it so much. This is a sapphic romance between our two main characters, Charlotte and Millie. They were best friends in college and Charlotte was in love with Millie back then, but because of a strained moment towards the end of college, they end up not talking and they meet again 10 years later in Oxford when they're both working there again. They went to Oxford for college, and Millie starts to realize that the love that she had for Charlotte may not have just been platonic. So yeah, Charlotte was like out as a lesbian when they were in college. Millie was seemingly straight when they were in college, but she's starting to question her sexuality later on. Overall, this was just so freaking cute. I loved the main characters. I loved the tenderness of their friendship and their relationship. It also had some really great character growth on both character sides. And at the end, we do get some like really cute and really sexy, spicy scenes, which I absolutely loved. And overall, it was just such a heartwarming read. And then the final book that I read for that vlog was Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. This is essentially a destination wedding romance in Tulum where the sister of the bride and the best man end up hooking up and decide that they're only going to do this for the week, but then they end up developing more feelings. But this book also had a really strong character development for the main character. She's the sister of the bride, but she also happened to previously date the groom, and everyone has been sort of walking on eggshells around her and assuming that she's not okay with the situation, but she really couldn't care less. And she's starting to realize that she's being treated very badly by her sister and her mother, and how she has just been giving in to her family members in a way that's been very unhealthy, and so she starts to stand up for herself by the end. This was probably my favorite book of that vlog because it was just a really fun romance. It was quick, it had some really great spicy scenes that were really well written, and I absolutely loved our main character and the love interest. I found both of them to be really compelling characters and the chemistry between them was just off the charts. Alright, and then I did another vlog where I read hot sad girl books. So Severance was one of the books in that vlog, and then I also read 3 other books for that vlog. If you haven't watched that video yet, go check it out because you'll get in-depth thoughts about each of these books. But the first book that I read for that video was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Mossvegh. This is my first ever Otessa Mossvegh and it was such a hit for me. This is the book for the depressed girlies out there who just want to read a mental illness satire and have a bit of a laugh while also watching a character who seems very similar to them. Essentially, this book follows a main character who wants to sleep a year of her life away. She calls it her year of rest and relaxation, and she thinks that if she can take all of these drugs and sleeping pills and whatever and sleep away this year, when she awakens a year later after these bouts of sleeping and short amounts of waking up, she feels that she will be healed and that she will finally be happy again. Obviously that won't be the case, but it was just a really funny satire, and she is helped by this really kooky and crazy psychiatrist who has the worst advice ever. So it's overall just a really funny read, but also has some very dark themes to it. The writing is really punchy and the main character has the most hottest takes ever on literally everything, so I just really enjoyed it. I know this book won't be for everyone, but it was the perfect type of dark humor satire that I personally love. And I cannot wait to read more Otessa Mossvegh books if this is any indication of her writing skills. And then after I also read Severance in that video, the next book I picked up was My Sister the Serial Killer. I've had this book on my TBR for years now, and I finally picked it up through the ebook and the audiobook. And this is essentially a really short novel. It could even be like a novella, I feel like. But it's set in Nigeria and it follows our main character who has essentially helped her sister cover up multiple murders of these men that she's been with. And every time she calls up her sister and says that, you know, something happened happened, she accidentally killed this person or was defending herself, our main character comes and cleans up the mess because she loves her sister and because she couldn't see her go to jail or, you know, anything bad happen to her. But when we open up in the book, the serial killer sister has set her eyes on the main character's crush at the hospital that she works at. And so this obviously introduces some friction between them. And the main character has to essentially choose between her own wants and desires and her sister's well-being and her love for her sister. This was such an unhinged read and I just loved every moment of it. It was so quick. It was so fun. The characters were really interesting. The dialogue was great and I just loved the way that it was narrated as well. And by the end, I think you learned something very interesting about the main character, which made for a really nice sort of plot twist for the book. Alrighty, and then the final book that I read over these past 2 months was All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami. This was also part of the Sad Hot Girl Books vlog. This is a translated fiction from Japanese and I've heard really great things about Mieko Kawakami. She's been described as an ex Murakami, and although I don't really like his books and haven't really tried them, I did really want to try her books because they seem to embody characters that I feel like I would really connect to. But this book essentially follows our main character, who is a copy editor and is a person who hasn't really taken much risks in her life, and she lives this very like monotonous life with not many friends. And at some point in the book, she starts to find herself falling for this strange man that she meets while she's going through this sort of chaotic moment in her life. But this book, honestly, I couldn't describe the plot to you because it has no plot. Nothing really happens in it and the character doesn't really do much, but somehow it was such a stunning read. I loved every moment of it. I was so enraptured by this character and her internal thoughts, and I was just in love with the way that this book portrayed a character who defied all of the societal norms. She wasn't a normal woman who's getting married and having kids and doing these things that we are told we need to do. And she's also faced with other female characters who are going through different moments in their life, and she has sort of a commentary on them, or a view of them, that I think is just really interesting. I feel like this is one of those books that you should just go into without knowing much and go along for the ride and see if you get something out of it. It was also really beautifully written, so I think that was a huge plus for it. And yeah, I don't know, by the end I just was left with this sudden and silent feeling of just being stunned. With that said, the final and 15th book that I read during these past 2 months was actually a manuscript that I was considering for my publishing imprint, Boundless Press. So if you didn't know, I have a bindery community, which is essentially Patreon plus publishing. Members pay a fee to support me and my channel and also support my publishing imprint, which will be publishing actual books. So over the past few months, I have been going through several submissions, and recently I found a really stunning one and I read the entire thing over the past month and really fell in love with it. And we are very close to potentially offering on that book, which is really exciting. So if you want to hear more about this book that I might be publishing, if you want to help me publish books, if you want to help support me and my channel and get exclusive content from me like journal entries, exclusive videos, and more, then please go sign up for my bindery community down below. You'll get the full behind the scenes on the publishing process. You'll get to help me decide the cover for the book and get early copies of the book when we do publish it. Alrighty, with that said, those were all 15 books that I read over March and April. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about each of these books and hearing my thoughts on them. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books and what you thought of them, if you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts on them. And also let me know what you guys read in March and April, if there were any new releases that you're really excited about, or if there are any books that I've talked about before that you read recently and you want to talk about. Let me know down below. I would love to discuss. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video, and please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!